Hi there! You're watching this video because you probably tried the Google form questions and you're a little bit stuck. So that's what this video is all about. I put this little cartoon here because I thought that was cute. He says, I don't know when I've seen it so humid. And the little fishies are like swimming around because, you know, there's so much water vapor in the air. Too funny. Okay. I hope that you are happy and healthy and well. If you're getting a little stressed out, you might want to think about exercising. Here I am with my yoga mat and my weights and my little stretchy bands. So if you are getting a little stressed out, maybe go online and try to find some exercise videos that might make you feel a little bit better. Okay. So for this video, I'm going to give you little hints for which questions on the practice worksheet, the Google form, this will help. So for example, what I'm going to talk about next should help you out with questions 3 through 5 on the practice questions. Something to keep in mind, to remember, that if the humidity is 100%, that means it's really, really humid outside, the most humid that it could possibly be. A couple of things might be happening. Number one, the dew point temperature might be exactly the same as the air temperature, right? And the air temperature, remember, is also called the dry bulb temperature. So that might be helpful to you. Another thing that might help you for questions 3 through 5 is that if the humidity is 100%, it might be snowing or raining or hailing or freezing rain, some kind of precipitation, right? That is usually when the humidity is 100% or really close to 100%, right? And another thing that might help you is if the humidity is 100%, there's probably dew or frost on the ground or on cars and things like that, right? And finally, remember that the dew point temperature is always going to be lower than the air temperature, right? That's always something that happens, or they could be equal to each other like they are here, right? But the air temperature is always going to be the one that's warmer. So hopefully that will help you out with questions 3 through 5. So I'm going to walk through some of the common errors that students tend to have when they're doing questions like this. For example, this one is very similar to question number 8 on the Google form. And the problem with this one says a psychrometer shows a wet bulb reading of -2 degrees, that's the wet bulb, and a dry bulb reading of 4 degrees Celsius. What's the dew point temperature? So the wet bulb in this case is -2 degrees Celsius. So whenever negatives come into play, students tend to get a little bit confused about that. I always draw a number line. So if you have a number line, here's 0, -2 would be here. There's -1. That would be my wet bulb. My dry bulb reading is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4. That's my dry bulb. Remember that you have to figure out the difference between these two in order to use that chart. So if you're doing that, you have to subtract 4 minus a -2. So you could do this a couple different ways. You could say 4 minus a -2, like that, or you could count it out. From here to here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So I know that the difference is 6. And if you're doing that over here, remember that when you subtract a negative, that turns into a positive. So you're actually taking 4 plus 2, which is 6. So hopefully that should help you out with this question. Now that you know that, go ahead and see if you can answer this question, and then I'll go over it. Okay, so you should have gotten answer 1, -19 degrees Celsius. Remember, our dry bulb temperature was 4 degrees Celsius, which is right here. I have to follow that over until I get my difference. Remember when we subtracted 4 minus -2, it was 6. So I follow that down, follow the 4 over, and that's how I got -19. If you selected -1, you probably did 4 minus 2 instead of 4 minus a -2. if you chose 11 degrees Celsius, you probably just went over 6 boxes on the chart. You got to be kind of careful with that. 1 box, 2 boxes, 3, 4, 5, 6 got you -11. And if you chose 14 degrees Celsius, you probably used the relative humidity chart and not the dew point chart. All right, let's try another one. This question is very similar to question number 12 on the practice question form. This says, what is the relative humidity if the dry bulb temperature is 5 degrees Celsius and the wet bulb temperature is 2 degrees Celsius? So this one is tricky because 5 degrees Celsius does not show up on the chart. So let's take a look at that chart. We're using the relative humidity chart for this one, and 5 degrees Celsius is not here, but 4 degrees Celsius for the dry bulb temperature and 6 degrees Celsius, they are there. 5 would be halfway between. So your answer is going to be right along this line, right along this line somewhere. So now go ahead and see if you can figure out the answer to this question, and then we'll check and see if you're right. All right, so remember, you first had to figure out the difference. We found out where 5 is for the dry bulb temperature. The wet bulb was 2. I have to subtract. That gives me 3. Here's 3. I'm going to follow that straight down. So it has to be in between 56 and 59, and that's why the correct answer was 57%. It could have also been 58%, but that was not one of the choices here. If you said -3%, you used the wrong chart. Also, a relative humidity cannot be in less than a 0%, so you should have figured that one out. If you said 71%, you got to be careful. Either you forgot to subtract and you used the wet bulb temperature. You used 2 and followed that down, and that's how you got 71%. Or you might have just forgotten to count. Maybe you didn't follow the 3 straight down. Maybe you counted 3 boxes over, and that's how you ended up with that. So just be careful, double check your work, and just kind of pay attention, and you've got this. The rest of this video is going to be for those challenging questions, the one after question number 20. So if you're not trying those challenging questions for bonus extra credit points, then you don't have to watch this. You could go back and just make sure you've got the questions 1 through 20 all done before you decide to challenge yourself with these. Okay, this one is very similar to question number 22. And something to be aware of, if the humidity is really high, then you're also going to have a higher probability of precipitation, right? Probability, that term should look familiar to you from your math classes. That's the same thing as a chance, right? So you have like a chance of precipitation, a probability of precipitation. And remember, precipitation is just rain, snow, that kind of thing. So if the humidity is 100%, remember, it's probably raining or snowing. And so if your probability of precipitation is high, then that means the humidity is probably high as well. Also remember that if the humidity, the relative humidity, is 100%, then that means that the air temperature is going to be the same as the dew point temperature. So that should help you out with this question as well. So we're looking for a dew point temperature that is really close to the air temperature. So go ahead and try and answer that question, and then we'll check in. So if you said that the answer was 9 degrees Celsius, you were correct, because that is closest to that 10 degrees Celsius. All right, let's try another one. So this one is like question number 24 on your practice sheet. And again, if the humidity is really high, you're also going to have a higher probability of precipitation, right? Okay, a higher chance of rain. So I think this one is challenging because of the phrasing of the question. It says, as the difference between the dew point and the air temperature decreases. The difference. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. let's say we have a temperature of 10 degrees Celsius and a dew point temperature that is 0 degrees Celsius. The difference between those two, 10 minus 0, equals 10, right? We want to decrease the difference. We want to make this difference get smaller. So let's say we want to change that difference so that it's 5, right? So now, if we keep the temperature at 10 degrees Celsius, the dew point temperature is going to have to be 5, right? Then that difference is going to be 5 degrees Celsius. So I've decreased my difference. If we go back to the question, it wants to know what's going to happen to the humidity. So let's think about this. In this second situation here, after I decreased my difference, is my humidity going to be greater or is it going to be less, right? Well, when I look at these two numbers, I see that these two numbers are now closer together. And I know that when the temperature equals the dew point temperature, it's going to be more humid. So this looks like it's more humid to me. So if it's going to get more humid as that difference between these two numbers decreases. So the correct answer should be A, meaning that it's increasing. It's getting more humid as that difference between the two decreases. All right, let's try another one. All right, so this is our last question that we're going to go over, and this is very similar to two questions, 30 and 35 on the practice question form, and these are really challenging. I like these questions though because they really kind of make you think, okay? So this is saying if the relative humidity was 83%, so right off the bat they're telling you the relative humidity, and they're telling you the dry bulb temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. But they're not telling you the wet bulb temperature. They want you to figure out the wet bulb temperature. So in order to figure this question out, we're going to have to look at the chart for relative humidity on page 12. So turn to that. And remember, the dry bulb was 22 degrees Celsius. So I can find my dry bulb temperature of 22 degrees Celsius. It said that the relative humidity was 83%. Where the heck is that? Well, here's the cool thing. Every single number here, all of these numbers are all relative humidity numbers. And on the dew point chart, all of these numbers that are here are all of the dew point numbers. You knew that. It's just that you probably hadn't thought that before. So we have to find 83% when the dry bulb temperature is 22. So if you follow this over until you find 83% right here, that gets us somewhere. So now, once we've found that, now you can follow that to find some information. We know then 2 is the difference between the wet bulb and the dry bulb. 2 is not the answer. Okay, I almost tricked you. So you got to be careful here. The answer choices, if you remember here, let's see. The first one was 2 degrees Celsius. The second one was 19 degrees Celsius. The third one was 20 degrees Celsius. And the last answer choice was 24 degrees Celsius. So we need to find the difference here. So if I'm trying to figure out the wet bulb temperature, that's what we're trying to figure out. And I know that the dry bulb is 22, the difference is 2. I know that it's going to be, it can't be this, it can't be 2 degrees, we just said that. Could it be 19? No, because that's 3 less than 22, so I know that can't be it. It's got to be either C or D. Those are both 2 degrees off from the 22 degree dew point temperature. So how do I know which one it is? Well, this is where you have to remember that the wet bulb temperature is always going to be colder than the dry bulb temperature. So if the wet bulb has got to be colder, that means that it's got to be lower than the dry bulb. And if the dry bulb is 22, there's no way that the wet bulb could be 24. So the answer's got to be 20 degrees Celsius. And then for question number 35 on the Google form, that is asking you for the dew point temperature or something to that effect, right? Either it gave you the dew point and it's asking you for the relative humidity, or it gave you the relative humidity and it's asking you for the dew point. In other words, you have to then switch over to the dew point chart. So once you find out this information on the on one chart, in this case the relative humidity chart, then you just use that same information on the other chart. So we know we're looking up 22 for the dry bulb and we're looking up 2 for the difference. Now we just switch to the dew point chart to figure out what the dew point is. So here we are. 22 was the dry bulb, 2 was the difference. Follow that down, follow it over, and 19 degrees Celsius would be the dew point temperature if that was what you were asked. That's kind of like what number 35 is asking you. So I hope that this was helpful. If you are still stuck, feel free to send me a message on Google Hangouts and I'll try to explain it a little bit better, or go back and rewatch these videos and maybe that will help you out as well.